Hey guys, come in, come in. Happy Thursday night. Hey
Hi.
Nancy,
Hey,
how's
you're
everything?
frozen. You're frozen.
Am I still frozen? Still?
Yeah. Oh, there you. Well, uh, yeah. Okay.
Am I
You're good.
frozen? Okay.
It was really strange. Yeah. You're good.
All right. Sorry, I'm thawed out now.
Yeah,
So,
you thought out.
well, we have a really special show, not in that it's um great, but in that yeah, it's a
Not in that it's
whoopsie.
great,
Okay, so
but
wait a minute. I'm playing on two different plays. Okay,
Now
not
you're
that
good.
that is great, but is it me that's having the trouble, or is it
It's
you or
me.
is it me?
It's not me. At least not
It's
right now.
me. It's me.
Yeah.
I apologize, guys. I
All
just got
you.
off of Jovan Pulitzer's show, talking about the stories that we've done here over the last couple days, but we're gonna put this one up again and kind of go through what's been going on here in North Carolina and what we have been talking about over the last few days. And it is child grooming mutilation promoters here in North Carolina supporting candidates. And it's not hyperbole. This is Equality NC. I'll tell you a little bit about Equality NC in a second. But yeah, it's we know that grooming is in the news, and Nancy, we're always called conspiracy theorists or haters or whatever for having this stuff on, but we actually mean it. So you support trans rights. Okay, good, Egg Princess.
Good.
We'll talk about that. Yeah, we're going to talk about that, right? So, this is Equality NC, and what they are doing is not only standing in the way of bills like the Women in Sports Act, but they're also standing in the way of the parental rights bill that we just had, which would advocate for making sure that there's parental consent in the classroom.
Sorry, you froze up again. But you're good now.
Okay, good to go now. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that would support such things as in the classroom, having parental consent for talking about medical procedures and things like that. So this is it's a lobby slash PAC, and so they're actually pretty powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so let's go ahead and talk about their lobbying arm. Their lobbying arm is up at Raleigh all the time. And as you can imagine, if you've got a lot of time to spend with your legislators, which none of us do, right? Then they've got an inordinate amount of influence over each and every one of our lawmakers. And we need to know a little something about that. But before we do that, I want to show some pictures here of the medical conference that's going to be in Wake Forest that I alluded to. This is a conference that is going to be talking about such subjects as puberty blockers for youth, as well as, let's see, I think also sex changes for kids. Is that what I remember in that?
Yeah, they're talking about sex changes. They're having a plastic surgery fellow come and talk about some of those operations. Yeah.
Right. So, yeah. And so this is the article that we wrote. So the candidates that they're supporting, it's really candidates all up and down the ballot, but check out the school board candidates, Nancy, that they're putting forth.
Yeah. No, they've definitely been trying to get it into the schools, the ideology and the immediate affirmations, which has been shown by, independent researchers over in England, Dr. Cass, in her review. The immediate affirmation is to actually be incredibly harmful for trans and LGBTQ youth. Studies show that doesn't work and can lead to increased suicide. But yeah, they've been very active already in Orange County. They've had been involved in community meetings from the Orange County School of Education. Mm-hmm. And that's just the start. I mean, they're going to try to influence every school board in the state for sure.
Absolutely. They're indeed. But let me tell you a little bit about this conference and what it supports. So it's actually teaching social workers and psychologists and physicians I would imagine, the benefits of transitioning children, really mutilating them. Is what it does. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. But look, the American College of Pediatrics has come out and said this is a problem for children that want to take puberty blockers. So permanent sterility, depression and emotional disturbances, osteoporosis, suicide, cognitive impairment. So lots of things can happen and do. So this nonsense where it's going to prevent suicide is completely bogus. Now, you're a surgeon, so you're going to talk a little bit about this, but what you're looking at right now is top surgery.
Yeah.
These are TikTok trans influencers, and we've got a joker on here that's just so so upset about this. This is trans grooming right here. Enjoy our ignorant conversation as the world moves on without you. Well, you know what? That's actually not true. There's a lot of kids that have detransitioned or it's called, I guess, detransition, that talk about the absolute horrors of this type of surgery. This is what's being So what's happening here, Nancy, is, we're seeing now, we saw in the Pitt Canning story, that kids as young as 5 years old are being subjected to, in preschool and older, being taught how to be an ally.
Right.
So they're being groomed in the schools. We know of at least now we're up to 3 elementary school children who have had their parents talk to about gender affirming care from teachers. You just saw a picture of what gender conforming care is.
Yeah. From that standpoint, from the top surgery standpoint, I trained as a general surgeon at UNC, and their general surgical program finished in 2010, became board certified. I don't practice now. And in that process, did hundreds of mastectomies, was involved in hundreds of mastectomies, logged them. They were all for breast cancer or preventative measures for breast cancer if someone had a high genetic chance of having breast cancer. And so I think the important thing to note here is that the takeaway here is that this is not some type of easily reversed surgery. This is a big deal. And a double mastectomy, meaning both sides, both breasts removed, itself is significant surgery, generally requires an overnight stay. You're at risk for all the usual surgical problems like infections, fluid retainment, abscess, DVT, blood clots, that type of thing. But the important takeaway is that this is a permanent change. You can't just reverse it. You can't just give back a kid their breast tissue once it's gone. It's not like a tattoo where you can maybe have it laser removed in the future. The surgeries, if you want to change your mind to have your genetic anatomy back, are very intense, can be very painful, are very difficult, require a lot of planning, can fail, and is not your normal breast tissue. So the surgeries that they do to reconstruct breast tissue usually require flaps, like muscles from other parts of your body, or synthetics like implants. And I saw a lot of those patients because we do mastectomies as a general surgery side, and the plastic surgeons would come in and sometimes do immediate reconstructions and round on them following that. And they were in a tremendous amount of pain from those reconstructions. And then the second takeaway, not just that this is a permanent surgery that's going to forever alter your body, and these kids are making these decisions with the help of these lobbies, before they're 18 or even, older. The other takeaway is the emotional aspect, where in caring for a lot of the patients who had to have mastectomies for breast cancer or other reasons, they went through, it was emotionally difficult time. it was very hard to watch a lot of women go through the process of dealing with portions of their anatomy no longer being a part of them. And I think sometimes what these young kids don't realize is they haven't grown to that point of maturity where at some point later on, they could very well realize, especially if they're gender fluid and changing genders, what if they feel like they're going to be female again and miss that portion of their body and themselves. So these are two very important issues that when you see, when I see materials from these training sessions or immediate affirming slideshows in schools and stuff, they never talk about that stuff. They never talk about how it's a very permanent change to your body, how any change of mind in terms of desiring a reconstruction is a big, big deal. And then the emotional aspects of it. Why not? Why not include that if you're going to have an all-inclusive discussion of these issues with kids?
Right. Well, look, I mean, when you start with the gingerbread person and you're starting with that in kindergarten, right? This is the grooming. This is the grooming that we're talking about. The picture I just put up of the gingerbread person. So we've caught at least, I don't know how many schools now we up to that have been using this to teach young children.
Yeah, and it's at the state level. It was on the Department of Pediatrics at UNC website for a while until, complained and got it taken down.
Right. I mean, let's talk about that again. So you found this being used. I'm going to put it up here in a second. You found this being used at UNC.
Yeah, the Department of Pediatrics website, and that and some other critical race theory based things without any opposing viewpoints, and especially, this or some version of it. And I wrote to Dr. Gold, who is the head of the diversity committee, because it was under their diversity portion of the website. And his answer wasn't very satisfactory. So I wrote to the chairwoman, Dr. Davis of the pediatric department there at UNC, and laid out my argument. And then later on, I ended up CCing it again, but to the legislature that provides funding for UNC, and reminded them this is not supposed to be a political entity. And later that afternoon, it was removed, but without any explanation. And when I offered to speak with Dr. Davis to show her materials in schools that kids were being faced with that parents didn't know about, that were really age inappropriate, she refused to meet with me and said she'd already addressed my concerns by taking the materials down. So
you know what that means.
Yeah. I said, well, I don't know that you really addressed them. But even that speaks in of itself, where you have this gender bred man or gender unicorn or whatever version of it you have with this spectrum of genitalia, which, by the way, wasn't even in my Greenfield surgical textbook when I was going through surgery. Like, they have, a significant chapter on pediatric surgery. That portion was not there.
Because it's not science. It's mutilation. And so, the Hippocratic Oath, I think, would argue against mutilating children and removing breasts just because.
Yeah. No, I would never feel comfortable doing it in a pediatric population. Never had to do it in a pediatric population. Again, the only times I did do it or see it was for cancer purposes in adults. There might have been some young adults, like early 20s, where we had to perform mastectomies, and they were horrified. And it's just, I don't understand wishing this on a child, thinking it will fix all the problems. And we have data that shows that it doesn't fix all the problems. So,
well, no, absolutely not. I mean, what I took those pictures off of, you guys, they're for public use. Those are trans influencers on TikTok. Just for your own edification, you ought to check it out for yourself. They're very proud of it. Look, I'm saying that there are teens who are, particularly girls, who are susceptible to peer pressure, right? And to maybe they're depressed or what have you, and they'll do anything to make that stop, be part of the cool kids. And it really is, you've got to see Even if you don't get TikTok for yourself, you've got to like look at that and check it out, and you'll see what's happening. But again, an organization, a group that's pushing this is Equality NC. Check it out. I mean, they were responsible for lobbying Catherine Truitt and getting PowerPoint to willingly, or her to remove the, not PowerPoint, Power School, right, to remove the biological sex and the names from kids. So, you know, on their permanent school records. So they have a lot of power for Republicans and Democrats. So look, this is a lobbying arm, the lobbying firm, rather, that does all the lobbying for Equality NC. They're called New Frame. Okay, they're up in Raleigh, and they fraternize. Nancy, you and I know them very well. They fraternize with Republicans as much or more, I believe, as they do Democrats. I mean, with Democrats, the bulwark of the Democrat Party right now is the trans issue. So they don't have to really lobby them a lot, but they spend a lot of time socializing with our side. This is their lobbying firm, New Frame. Okay, so this is Christy Jones. She sits on the Davidson County School Board. And so we've looked her up.
Right.
Yes. And she is about as far left as you can imagine. She supports, it escapes me now, the Hunt Institute, the Bill Gates organization, the Hunt Institute, and others. This is her lobbying firm that supports them, which is why we just gave a special invitation out to about 30 folks that live in Davidson County. We're forming a special task force in Davidson County. There's no advocacy there on the ground that's getting after, watching after our schools. And not only is she a part of the lobbying firm, she's proud to be a part of this team. Thanks for starting this firm and allowing me to be a part of it. Have a great Labor Day. Christy, you're going to get to know us. I don't know if you're going to like us, but we're going to talk.
Yeah, that's a problem.
Why would a lobbyist want to be on a school board? I mean, I can think of the reasons. Can you?
Well, I don't know why you want to vote in someone or who is on that type of is in that type of company, that lobbying. I mean, there's a conflict of interest there. You know, it seems ethically problematic to me. And we know from prior experience with other school districts that that Equality NC has been very involved in the K through 12 schools, and we've seen, you know, I've watched them, individuals from their outfit, you know, talk with school board members and advancing, you know, immediate affirmation and talking about the binary, the gender binary or biological sex is violence. Just talking about it is violence. Yeah. I mean, this is how radical that organization, these people are when they come into the school. So it's concerning that that these lobbyists have someone on a school board itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely. And again, you know, there hasn't been any advocacy here around this until now. We're going to get on it. Here's a dude. He's upset, working for Alan Beck. So he's obviously in for the grooming, and he thinks we're all liars. He doesn't think that Christy works for Full Frame. Sir, we're not going to allow groomers to have access to our children at very high levels. We're going to take these schools back. And if you don't like it, I would suggest you talking to Christy to see if you could get a job with Equality NC. I do think that they are hiring, and you can be, oh no, he doesn't like grooming. A poor guy. He's just so mixed up. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know. Please, grooming, no grooming, etc. A stalker, Joshua.
Stalker, liars.
Liar, Joshua, I'm sorry. You can take your groomers and you can go bye-bye. So again, you know,
just for a laugh.
Yeah, poor fella. You know, we get this all the time. Look, we're taking on I would say, really the most powerful lobby in Raleigh, and that would be Equality NC. I'm telling you, they got a lot of money. They support candidates all up and down the ballot. They're trying to take out our great Ted Budd in support of Sherry Beasley. I think Ted Budd should force her to answer the question, right? Do you support teaching children this in kindergarten and first grade?
Yeah, well, we already know. I mean, you can look to UNC, and the fact that the Department of Pediatrics pulled it down, I mean, that says something in itself. Somehow it got up there through an activist who works in the offices, and the doctors don't have time necessarily. I mean, maybe they knew about it. I don't know. I wasn't on the inside there. But generally, doctors don't have time to know what's on every single website and whatever else. And then when they saw it and they recognized that, hey, here's someone who trained in our program, who's bringing this up, who's willing to go to the legislature and discuss funding and everything, it came right down. So it's not medically accurate, or else they would have left it up. So they made a statement just in taking it down that it's not appropriate. And in addition, if you go to their diversity, which I check in every once in a while to their diversity website, they have put up some PowerPoint presentations from their various grand rounds and things. One of them deals with their gender identity clinic, and in it, it states specifically, in their lecture that surgeries for under 18-year-olds are not part of gender affirming care for at least UNC. So, I mean, they do puberty blockers, which is certainly questionable. And if you look to the independent review from Dr. Cass over in England that brought down the Tavistock Institute, they bring those into question and say there's no consensus and there's no really good research.
Let's stop right there. The reason why we bring up the UK is that over in the UK, this is nationalized, right? Because they have a nationalized healthcare system. So you're going to find that they're about 3 or 4 years ahead on what they're doing. So they've already done this gender experiment. They're seeing the suicides. They're seeing the deleterious effects. They're seeing all of that, and they're putting the brakes on it. And then, and Joshua, I'm sorry, but these are our children, right? You have a surgeon sitting here in front of you, right?
You can Google the Cass review for.
Yeah, don't know what she'd be lying about. But
read it; it's there.
These the people that are supporting the grooming, they're going to act like Joshua, right? They're going to say that we're all liars. But again, the proof is actually out there. This came, I believe, from Moore County in first graders. We've seen it all over the state. And if you don't see it in Davidson, Joshua, you're going to start seeing it. And we're going to put together a task force that's going to take care of business in Davidson. Don't you worry about it. So, getting back to this, the UK is 3 or 4 years ahead of us. They've been taking the puberty blocker, these kids. They've been, doing the child mutilations. And tell us about what they're finding there.
Well, so their clinic to deal with the gender dysphoria was called Tavistock. And basically, they have the National Health Service identified an independent review committee, which is headed by this woman named Dr. Cass, who's a pediatrician who retired in 2018. And she had been the head or the president of the Royal College of Pediatricians there in England. And if you read her report, the Cass report, which is the independent review that ultimately led to the closing of Tavistock this summer, it's very good. And she's not going at it from an ideological standpoint, which is
correct.
Even in this report, it's they document this is a problem because so many of these studies come from a specific ideological or politicized or polarized standpoint, which is a problem going on in medicine in all sorts of departments. So they even recognize that. But the overall takeaway from this report is there's just no good data. And Tavistock itself did such a poor job of collecting data that they really have no consensus information when it comes to puberty blockers and the long-term effects and all of these things. And they do know in the short term that it affects bone density and, cognitive development and all of these things. The other thing they point out in this is the overwhelming increase in the number of children referred to the gender dysphoria clinic. In 2009, they had 50 referrals per year to this clinic in England. By 2020, it was 2,500.
God.
So in 10 years, it increased from 50 per year kids to 2,500. And a third of those had some type of autism spectrum or neurological, issue. These are complex issues in kids that have, potentially multiple other diagnoses that can lead to very confusing developmental stages. And there's just not the data out there to immediately confirm or, do an immediate gender affirmation, especially if you're not a specialist in the field. So, and then also part of that problem is that the increase they're seeing is especially in the subgroup, which we've seen lately, which is the young females wanting to transition to males. In 2009, that wasn't so much the case. It was more men transitioning to women. Well, now in the last 5, 6, 7 years, we've seen this huge uptake in adolescent women wanting to have the surgery and wanting to become men. And the data just isn't out yet on that because it's kind of a new phenomenon in that subgroup. So if you read that report, it's very good.
So Nancy, what's happening is girls are getting top surgery like what we showed you. And on top of it, they're taking the puberty blockers, which means they're going to be sterile.
Yeah, the top surgery alone isn't necessarily going to sterilize them. But the issue is, the long-term effects of the puberty blockers. And then, of course, if they, have a hysterectomy or their ovaries are removed, then yes, they would be sterile.
Yeah.
But again, they also found that they surveyed a lot of the caregivers in this clinic and providers, and the caregivers overwhelmingly felt pressured that they had to do immediate affirmations, that they couldn't really investigate some of these complex issues that might be going on in the child's life. And again, just a limited amount of long-term follow-up and no real consensus on any of these issues. So in terms of some of the literature that I've reviewed, and none of it's going to be very good, right? Because it's hard to do like randomized controlled trials when it comes to suicide for good reason, obviously. So a lot of these studies you're going to find are going to be observational or retrospective or things you can't control for, where there's going to be a lot of confounding factors that affect the results. But a lot of these studies, even that show, for example, better improved rates of, or fewer rates of suicide after being on puberty blockers, a lot of the long-term follow-up, some of them, 50% of the people in the study didn't report for follow-up, like were lost to follow-up. So a lot of these studies are really no good that they use to claim this. And of course, none of them really broach the chicken or the egg topic, which is, are they having mental health issues and they're trying to solve them by thinking they're going to be a different gender is going to solve them, or is being a different gender a mental health issue? Like there's so much confusion there.
Right. Yeah. And what came first, and they are, preying upon, and I saw this just in my cursory viewing of the TikTok stuff, is that a lot of the people who had this done are on the spectrum. So again, if you're just joining us, what we're talking about is we've got Equality NC, which is not only a PAC, but it has powerful lobbyists in Raleigh who are lobbying for, they'll tell you trans rights, right? Like this egg princess. Okay. I support trans rights. Okay. But they're also pushing pedal to metal on the child grooming. In other words, these classroom lessons, which we just showed you, and they're going on all over the state, that create the demand for the surgery that Nancy just told you about. And again, you're going to hear, oh, you guys are all liars, etc. Well, I mean, the proof is in the pudding, right? So what we're looking at here is this Tavistock failure on, these harmful drugs to gender, they call it gender confused youth. Again, the UK is, I'm not a specialist, but I think 3 or 4 years maybe ahead with medicine, because
Well, even in this report, they go into the definitions, because that's another thing they identify, is that there is no clear consensus definition of what the problem we're even dealing with.
Problem.
And so there's like an ICD definition from the WHO, and then there's the DSM-5, and they go through that as well. That's why it's a very comprehensive investigation.
So DSM-5 is a manual for clinical diagnoses of mental malus, if you will, right? And then the ICD-9 is if you're in the operating room and you have to code something for billing, that is a procedural code, right? For what you would treat for.
Yeah,
so what they're doing is they're taking a gender dysphoria, which it may not even be, right? A mental thing, and then they're operating, which is so rare, you guys. I want to tell you how rare that is.
Yeah, I never saw
psychology. Right. In psychology, the only thing I can think of that's operative is electrical shock therapy, right? That isn't even done anymore. In other words, taking something that's a mental health issue and then going to the operating room, you just don't see that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've talked to, I know some pediatricians through family and everything else that, spent decades in clinical practice and busy clinical practices, now retired, who never saw one case, not one, of this. And with that and that anecdotal evidence and the data from this report saying, it was 50 referrals a year in 2009 to now 2,500, 11 years later. There
social contagion.
And the fact that if you mention contagion or trends, you're immediately labeled transphobic, and it's
or called a liar.
Right. It's not transphobic to talk about. It's important to talk about these complex factors and how social media and communication affect these adolescent minds in order to protect them, to make sure that the people who need the treatment, whatever that treatment ends up being, get the appropriate treatment, and the people who don't need the treatment don't have malpractice performed on them, right?
Well, I mean, exactly. It's like amputating the wrong leg, which I've seen a couple times, right? You're sort of like, okay, 5 years later, I wonder, Nancy, to your point, are some of these surgeons going to get their asses sewed off because they've gone and done an irreparable harm to the patient, which could be actionable.
Yeah, well, they've even found, there was a big study, or one of the studies a lot of people refer to is in 2011 in Sweden, where they looked at some cohorts and found that the suicide rate 10 years after surgical transitioning, or however they defined that, was 20 times higher. Like, it was at its highest point because they reasoned that, or hypothesized that the transition didn't actually help the underlying issue, and that you can't actually change your biological sex. And so people entered into something that was permanent, that they thought would fix how they feel, and it didn't. And they still ended up, committing suicide. So you take this info from 2011, and it turns out that the Obama administration used that info in their Medicare committees to say, look, we can't have Medicare pay for this treatment at this point in time because there's just not enough data. There's not enough consensus data that it works. And in fact, there are large studies out there that show that it's actually done detrimental in countries like the Netherlands, which is one of the most trans-friendly, communities out there. So, you even have in 2016, the progressive administration of Obama saying we can't pay for this. The data just isn't here. It can't be covered by Medicare. And only, fewer than 10 years later, where there's no really additional data out there that is at all going to form a consensus that is not politicized, whatever else now.
Correct.
Going to get to the point where, North Carolina, through its employees benefit health program, is going to pay for these surgeries in young kids. It doesn't make any sense.
Let me tell you what that is. It means if you're a teacher or a principal or whatever, you could work for the state, and now part of your benefits would be paying for that top surgery that you saw, or puberty blockers, which happen to be very, very expensive. And now we've got, lobbyists who are glad handing with Republicans and with Democrats. That is so deeply problematic. I can't even tell you. So again, you're looking at Christy Jones, Davidson County School Board member. We did a cursory check of her Twitter feed. Big time supporter of the Hunt Institute, the Gates Institute. So very, very Gate connected. Definitely in with this lobbying firm that pushes this crap. And we'd like to know more about what's going on. We're forming a task force there. I mean, this is probably the most dangerous lobbying firm in all of Raleigh.
Yeah, I think, wasn't it? I'd have to get fact checked on this, but I think they were the ones that were pushing for legislation that put in gender neutral language in terms of the rape statutes or something like that.
They're trying to.
Yeah,
right.
to do that. Yeah, so
they're trying to remove women from every equation imaginable. Davidson County Schools, you guys, you need to look and make sure. Well, you need to see what the damage is done there. We had a conference tonight with several parents from Davidson, and they've been paying attention. Haven't heard anything about this yet, and we need to see what's going on here with Christy Jones, and she's just so tickled pink to be working at this lobbying firm.
Yeah.
Just peachy. Everything's peachy. I don't know why a lobbyist. By the way, she's the head of Head Start also. Yeah. So we're going to get to know Christy very well and see what kind of damage, if any, she's doing on the Davidson County School Board. But we're going to stay on this story. We're going to talk. We're not going to stop talking about this lobbying firm and how much influence, outsized influence, they've got in our elections. And that's really the key here is, Nancy, for the first time, we've got a PAC and a lobbying company that's directly connected with sterilization and mutilation of children, influencing elections and people who are elected. Bad stuff.
Yeah, it just confirms what the Cass report reported in England, the politicization, sorry, I can't pronounce it, polarization and politicized approach to medicine, especially when it comes to the transgender and the gender dysphoria issues. And this is a prime practical example right here in living color. A woman involved with a highly active lobby that wants to put in gender neutral language and bills, eradicate biological sex, wants to have this stuff in K through 12, is sitting on a K through 12 board.
Sunny Flowers, love the name. Her term is not up this year. I know she's up in 2024. In Davidson County, they're staggered 4-year terms. And so what we need to do is make sure that she is, we find out what's going on in Davidson County Schools, and who knows what she can do from her board position there all over the state. We're going to find out. We're just beginning to understand, her and what's going on, if anything. And we're just going to keep looking and go where the data takes us.
Yeah. It's just so important to be aware of the background of what lobbies are involved, and there's just so much information out there. It's impossible to keep up with it all.
Mm-hmm. It absolutely is. And so Sunny is saying, what about the other board members? Wouldn't they follow what she believes? We don't know. We don't know until we get facts, right? We don't know until we get facts. So when we get those, we will let you know. But your board members, it is a very, very crucial race. We don't have to tell you guys. You're looking at it. Here in Wake County, there's 9 board seats up. The Quality NC supports 2 board members who are up for election, and they actually support the board chair. They actually support the board chair, Lindsay Mahaffey. We've got to get her out. In Durham, they support 2, which is absolutely that's not a shocker, right?
Right. No, like I said, in Orange County, Robbie Kern, who's a major person for Equality NC, involved in communication with educators. It was heavily involved with Orange County and appeared at their school board meetings amongst, the school board and I think was one of the actors behind some of their secret gender plans to keep gender transition secret from kids, and behind the gender spectrum stuff in Orange County. I can't prove it, but the timing, certainly seemed coincidental. So yeah, these are people who have an absolute political intent to change the approach of parental rights in K through 12 education.
Yeah. So, this is, we just have to stay on this, but look, again, it's connected. And I guess I'm going to make this connection from the operating room to the halls of Raleigh in a way, but definitely under the school boards.
I mean, I could never imagine, when I was training 10, 20 years ago, and I can pretty much, I would bet a lot of money that none of my colleagues could imagine that this would be a thing in schools, top surgery, mastectomies for young kids without any sort of traumatic, reason or cancer or something like that. It's really amazing, and how fast it's changed.
Doing it just cause. We had someone saying, when's the next board meeting? So parents want to know more about Christy Jones and her plans. I'm going to be very candid with you. The board meeting isn't the best way to find out everything. And it's not even close to being the best way to find out anything going on here, right? I don't think that she's got plans that you could actually ask her about. What I do think is there's probably some influences parents need to kind of poke around and see. And I do think that parents need to have a one-on-one conversation with Christy and other board members, by the way. We're a big fan of engaging first, maybe taking them out for a coffee or whatever. These are
asking open questions.
Yeah, these are human beings, by the way. Say, hey, look, you're a lobbyist. Where does your role end? This is a good question. Where does your role end? And one thing and begin in another. That's, these are very good questions. So, you've got to ask these questions. One question that you'd ask her is, hey, how come it is that girls don't have their own bathrooms and changing rooms anymore? How come they have to be shared with boys? Ask these kind of questions like, how come girls can play on the sports team? Just see what she says. See what she says about Equality NC. I mean, again, that is one of her firm's top clients. You need to ask her. We certainly will be asking her those questions. We need to see when we get facts on the ground, looking and seeing what kind of influence that she has. But again, we just put up how many? 9 board members, 10 board members. Ask them also, hey, do you agree with top surgery? Do you agree with puberty blockers? Okay, you don't, or maybe you do. But if you don't, then why won't you disavow Equality NC? Oh, no, I know, because you answered their questionnaire and you support their agenda. These are the questions we need to ask. You just saw who was running. I think there's one in Guilford also. So we need to be very clear on getting these people on the record and getting underneath what they've already done.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So guys, thank you for tuning in. This is a breaking story. We're going to keep on and on and on with it. Our work is just beginning in Davidson County, Durham, Wake, Guilford. I believe there was a Granville, and Judy Justice in New Hanover, who made up that name and goes by that name now. It's a pretty cool name.
Judy Justice. It's like Judge Judy. What if you're Judge Judy Justice?
She's a special woman out there in New Hanover. So yeah, we're going to be talking to all these candidates and seeing what they're saying. If they support the agenda, we encourage you to do that too. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you, Nancy, for explaining.
I try.
all that surgical stuff.
Yeah.
Very complex. All right, guys. Thank you.